Man. Okay. What is not what is one of the important things that you have touched on is that people are taking a combination of drugs and they go into an overdose state when they get to the hospital, or if the emergency ambulance comes, they can treat them for an overdose of one thing, and it could be the overdose could be coming from some other element.
Absolutely. And what happens is the emergency responder has to treat symptoms. And what does that mean? If your breathing starts to drop, then I'm going to say you're taking something that causes respiratory distress. What is that? Usually an opiate. Because working. It's not faster than 100 beats per minute. 180 beats per minute, heading toward 200. At 225, you're in tachyarrhythmias, which can cause a fatal heart attack. It doesn't matter if you're 16 or 17 years old. If your heart rate gets high enough, the heart will just stop. It'll just cramp. So if you go into a tachyarrhythmia, I have to treat that as a rapid heartbeat. So what happens when you come in with this cocktail of drugs is, in order to guess what's happening, I'm giving you more drugs, and I'm losing time. Because if Narcan, which would be the opposite of a respiratory depressant, is not the right medicine, I'm just giving you an additional load of something.
Okay.
So when there's an unknown cause of drug overdose, it's a fight against time as much as an effort to rescue the person.
Now I'm going to ask you a street question. And the street question is, if an individual who is taking whatever kind of drugs sees that people are going into a zombie state as a result of taking K2 or spice, what leads them to use that same product? Has that ever come up
Well, believe it or not, some people find that which is risky to be more inviting. It sounds so horrible, but when there was a rash of overdoses coming out of Fort Bragg, at least that's what CDC identified, and it was called the Widowmaker. And this became what they would ask for. They literally wanted the drug that was killing people. They felt like, that's kind of like if I tell you I have a fast car and it's faster than any other car you've ever ridden in, and that's the car you want to drive. Well, the concept is, if I like my regular high, if you give me something strong enough to kill some people, that must be a high that I want. So unfortunately, that becomes a street selling plus.
You mentioned Fort Bragg. Is that what you said?
Yeah, there was a rash of drugs coming in through some of the military bases. It was identified as that's how they were getting here, because they were coming in on the planes with some of the military returning, and then it was getting dispersed from that point. And they were able to identify some of the drugs had been cut, in New York and other places, as they say, they step on it. They may mix powdered milk, they may mix talcum powder, but they mix the compound with something before they make it into pills or make it available for inhalation. Well, if you get someone bringing the drug in, and the drug has been diluted down, if you want to think of it that way, someone may be used to taking a certain amount of drug and having a high that lasts 6 to 8 hours, and they get this medication or this drug that has not, as they say, been stepped on, and it'll kill them because they're actually taking 4 times the dose the body used to.
Man. Sister Shirley.
Oh, Lord. It's confusing me back. I hope I got it right. Did she say they take it in the buttocks?
Go back over how people will take it in the elimination canal, you know.
They want more of the exotic information. Well, one of the fatalities that I was part of, had to witness, came in with a young lady, and some say that she was more suicidal than trying to get a high. But the situation that she had taken Tylenol, she had taken aspirin, and she also had Percocet. Now, Percocet is in the opiate family, and when you take a high dose of that, it can depress your breathing, and you start having real shallow breath. We have a medication called Narcan that we can reverse it. Well, when you take aspirin, of course, you're running the risk to start bleeding because aspirin prevents you from clotting. Well, Tylenol is a particular bad actor in an overdose because it has something called a Bezor. I know it's a funny word, but that's the word, Bezor. And what it means is the body will surround Tylenol into a ball. And you treat the patient, and 4 hours later, the ball will let more Tylenol out. So you can actually treat a patient, but you can't send them home, or they'll go home and die. So Tylenol is a real bad actor. If they come in with an overdose on Tylenol, they usually have to be hospitalized for about 48 hours. Now, why am I telling you this? This particular young lady didn't just swallow aspirin, Percocet, and Tylenol. She also inserted it vaginally and put a tampon in place.
Damn.
So when we treated her and could get her blood pressure stable, her heart rate, suddenly she'd start drifting again, and we'd have another emergency. When we lost that fight, like I said, the battle against time. And it wasn't until the coroner or pathologist was doing his evaluation that he discovered she had packed her vagina area with Tylenol, Percocet, and aspirin. So we were fighting a battle we couldn't win.
You know, in church they say, "Mine, mine, mine."
That was a case, was really sad. 19-year-old female, we lost her, and when we discovered, we didn't know that we need to check every orifice. So now the ER protocol, at least when I was medical director, is when they come in, we strip them down, we take every stitch off, and we look everywhere. The other exotic place, now you may find this really funny, it was a couple that were treating each other. I don't know, it was part of their play, I guess, and they would do enemas, and they would do wine enemas, coffee enemas, and in this particular case, they were doing wine enemas, and the bowel absorbed so much alcohol that the husband went into an alcohol toxicity. And what was difficult is the questions that we were asking, did he drink? And she kept saying no, 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 until finally it became clear he didn't take anything by mouth.
Man.
She was pumping it per rectum.
Wow. So
yes.
the drug culture is actually a drug culture.
Well, all bets are off. I mean, when I would tell my staff and when I was working, I never went in with a preconceived idea. If somebody was acting strange or whatever, I would simply get assistance, and I said the first thing we have to do is we have to strip the patient down because some drug users will shoot between the toes, some will shoot under the tongue. So if you're looking to know did they shoot any kind of a drug into their body, you can't just look at their arms and veins. You got to look everywhere.
Okay.
There's a condition called skin popping, and that's what a person does. They just put the needle in any place. They don't even look for a vein. They just skin pop it.
Let's revisit the fake marijuana.
Okay.
And explain that process. The chemical is developed, then sprayed on. Start there.
Okay. Well, the spice or K2, as it's often called, starts in a laboratory as a liquid. Someone is literally synthesizing a compound that behaves or chemically very similar to cannabis, which is found in the real Indian hemp or marijuana. is a wild grass, or sometimes it's sprayed on lemongrass. And they do it to mimic the appearance of marijuana. And the reason they go to all this trouble is that legally, that is not a contraband. In other words, if someone catches them with this product, they can arrest them on a felony. It's because it has never been declared as a recreational drug. However, the people doing it intend for it to be used as a recreational drug. And teenagers, by word of mouth, can tell each other, oh, well, let's go get some Spice or K2. And it was at one time sold freely at some of the 24-hour gas station or truck stops because it is not on the judicial listing as a drug.
Right.
Now, I think firearm, tobacco, and others will now, if they see the paraphernalia, they can cite the store for drug paraphernalia, but it was never declared in itself a drug that gives you a felony or an arrest.
So, talk about the intent of that compound, the intent for it to hit a certain part of the brain.
Okay, well, we're talking about the cortex, and that is the section of the brain of higher thought. It's our logic center. It's how you can learn one thing and be able to apply it to a totally new situation. So we consider that higher thinking. So the cerebral cortex, you could watch me paint something, then I could wash the brush and lay it down, and you could go and get that brush and decide to use it to paint a driveway where you watched me paint a house. You can take a tool and apply it in a new way because you can what we call extrapolate. And that's the part of the brain that this particular compound will interfere with. And in some unfortunate few, it doesn't just give you that euphoric kind of drunk feeling and the next day you have a hangover. And 20% of the users, it permanently deforms the connections in that part of the brain. And when that happens, that's when you get the zombie-like. That's someone who you can talk to and can't be sure that they're listening. They may look, but you'll feel vacancy. You'll say, oh my goodness, is he even paying attention? You might give them a task and explain it. The best example is if you were stacking boxes and you told, let's say, an 18 or 19-year-old, let's stack the boxes 6 high. And they get a box and they set it on and turn around and look at you. And you would say, well, what's the problem? I tell you we're going to stack it 6 high. What you're not understanding is that person can't process another element of what you told them. They do exactly what you say and that's it. And then sometimes they can't even follow directions at all. That's the term zombie.
Last week, it came out that somebody had taken K2 or Spike, and they've been diagnosed at the hospital as being a schizophrenic. There's something.
I was waiting you to say that. You know, that's a real scary thing. Schizophrenia, we don't know what happens. We're thinking that it's genetic. Some will say it's genetic, but it's not a single entity. In other words, genetics will set you up to have the tendency, but it doesn't mean you will get it. You have the tendency. So something else has to happen. We call it a two-strike disease. That one thing alone, you may have 5 kids, 3 of them have the tendency, but they don't get that second strike and you never know that they're carrying it. However, you say, well, what's the second strike? Second strike can be extreme grief. It can be, let's say you send someone off to war and he's put in a situation and he doesn't want to shoot the enemy. Or between killing someone and not killing someone, he can set that second strike and he never come back the same. He come back a full-blown schizophrenic. You can have a college-age person, let's say 21, 22. He's a straight-A student in high school. He goes to college. He's starting to make C's and D's. He's going to lose a scholarship. Parents don't understand. They're accusing him of playing too much. He goes into this stress and becomes schizophrenic. You've heard people say, well, he had a nervous breakdown. Well, what they're really saying is something is as a person who had the tendency for schizophrenia, but they also had the stressor. Well, unfortunately, K2 and spice can be that stressor. You can have a young man make it all the way to 2021. He's mom's joy, he's dad's summer, and he goes out one night and gets hooked up and does spice, and he's never the same. He comes home saying drunk, wake up the next day and he's babbling. He can't hold a thought. He's not the same person. This is like night and day. Well, it is like night and day. Triggered what was there, and now you fired the bullet, and it's no return.
Whoa.
The reason I knew that, there was a young man in the neighborhood who was a bright kid and would help anybody with their car, and he was at community college doing well, and with some friends that came back on military leave, went out night clubbing, and came in kind of drunk, whatever. Mom said, well, this is not like him. Next morning, he just wasn't the same person and never recovered. He actually would walk up and down the street in the neighborhood and talk to himself and just was disheveled. He just wasn't the same person. So when I talk to young people, it's, well, look at your background. You know, there are some people who can smoke and stop smoking and never do it again. But there's a lot of them that chain smoke and can't get off of it and got to use patches. It's the same things with drugs. There may be something in your genetic makeup that if you ever initiate this chemical, you won't be able to get away from it. And unfortunately, sometimes the chemical can permanently affect the higher centers of the brain.
Beyond
Of course, the secondary thing we talked about is any chemical as it's broken down, the liver, the kidneys are going to be affected because those are your organs of elimination. And unfortunately, if you're young enough, the chemicals more aggressively affect young men genetically than it does young women.
No, say that again. It will.
It's more, let's say we're talking a 15-year-old instead of a 19-year-old. If you had two 15-year-olds and they got introduced to spice, one is a girl and one is a boy. If all other things are equal, they don't get the brain damage, the young man is likely to have adversely affected his ability to reproduce. He will have problems, possibly he can render himself sterile, and secondarily, he can just have problems for the rest of his life in reproducing. Because it hits the male genitalia more forcefully than it does the female when you're in an adolescent stage. And you may even show some effeminization, and that's controversy, whether or not he could become effeminized using these medications or these drugs. You know what I mean, right? He becomes ACDC, light in the loafers, no longer have a high testosterone production. He will be more feminized.
Dr.
We know there are certain drugs that we know will cause men to grow breasts. You've heard about Risperdal? Yeah, Risperdal, the side effect for a man is that he gets gynecomastia, which means he will grow breasts. So if you have a teenager who's put on Risperdal for behavioral disorders, if he's between the age of 12 and 15, he may develop full-blown breasts. I mean, like a C cup or a D cup.
And that's a known effect of the
That's a
drug.
known side effect, yes. That's a known side effect for men. It is gynecomastia. Do we give it a fancy word? What it means is grow breasts.
And they would give this to a child.
They do it every day, Brother Leroy. Risperdal is given to old people for Parkinsonian. If you know someone who really shakes really bad, we usually give them about 1 to 2 milligram Risperdal to steady their hand. So it works in the brain to help calm you down. So if you have, let's say, a young man who's always fighting, maybe he's hyper-aggressive, and he may be angry young people Risperdal and they give older people Haldol.
So, parents, man, oh man.
There's a number of parents probably administering, especially young black males, Risperdal, because it's a popular calming medication prescribed to aggressive black males. And so you notice I use the word aggressive because that's the language, that's the labeling.
And that aggressive is a stereotype labeling. At the same time, it's a realistic labeling as it relates to a young black boy who's thinking on his own. He may have a wayward manifestation of this, defying authority, but he is part of a generation that King Herod does not want to see come into full bloom.
Well, if someone has an opinion that black people should be obedient and obeysive, it's very easy for them to label you aggressive. You know, if I expect that when I say to the dog, sit, and the dog doesn't sit, I can call him bad dog. It doesn't mean the dog is bad, it means he was not obedient. So unfortunately, with Black America, young black men, free thinkers, the inventors, we were always the inventors, when you're put into a situation where you're obedient and you're compliant, is more important than your education and your humanness. You will be labeled with some adversarial term. I'll give you a good example. Now, you've known me and everybody at the table know me. I was at a university here in Louisiana, and I was an instructor. I was in the back of a large room one day putting together a booklet for my students. And someone came in, it was a petite white female, and I heard her talking, so I gave her my attention, and what she said was, this stool belongs to Dr. X, and you need to take it back to room 416. Well, I couldn't believe she was talking to me. So I looked at her, I waited, and she was obviously, I was the only one in the room. She is standing at the front of the lecture hall telling me I need to transport a stool, which was like a little, sit-down stool, to somebody else's room. And I'm thinking, is she for real, this lady? Petite female is directing me to carry a piece of furniture from this room to another? So without really putting a lot of thought in it, because I was busy, I looked at it and I said to her, I did not bring the stool into the room, and I had no intention of taking the stool out. And she said, well, I'll just take it myself. And I looked at her and said, help yourself. Well, to me, that sounded like a reasonable discourse between two adults. Well, believe it or not, about an hour and a half later, I went over to the chancellor's office because I had to drop something off, and the vice chancellor came rushing out to me and said, Dr. Boles, I heard that you were very rude today. I was dumbfounded. I said, rude? I said, I've been in this room the last 6 hours putting together the package for my final exam. So I haven't talked to anyone. I have not gone to lunch. I haven't even had a bathroom break. I said, the only way I could be rude, someone had to come and walk right up on me. And she kind of blushed and said, oh, well, I'm so glad it's not true. But the bottom line is, because I told this lady that I had no intention of relocating the stool as I had been instructed, she didn't just tell her friend, she went to the chancellor's office and complained. So it says her expectations when she told me to come get that stool and walk it over to another room that I was supposed to do it. She didn't care that I was a professor. She didn't care that I was working on my student material. I was disobedient.
Now, when you take that experience and you match it up with what white women are doing today, complaining about this person, that person, they're calling the police on people doing barbecue in the park with their own family. And you hear these things, and it's all over the country. Louisiana,
Yes.
California,
Mhm.
Yale University, I think it's Yale,
Mhm.
Harvard, Yale, and other spots. What do you draw from that?
Well, it's an expectation, the concept that you are supposed to be obedient. You are supposed to be subordinate. Although we don't overtly see colored drink here or colored don't eat here, there's still that assumption. I mean, again, I have walked into places and stood there and had someone rush up to me and say, "May I help you?" And it was a lounge. Well, other people come in, sit down, and order a drink. Why are you rushing to see if you can help me? It's as if you want to let me do my business and get out. Like I must be making a delivery, or I must be coming there for some kind of manual thing. And it does not matter how well I'm dressed or how well I present. So what it says to me is there's that pervasive, lingering, pervasive belief of superiority.
Okay, you
And
now that
if I'm superior to you, you need to be obeisant. You need to be obedient.
okay. I think pervasive fits what I'm looking at because if it was all in one place, you would call it a cluster.
Yes.
But it's not in one place. It's the same thing happening around the country,
Yes.
and that message, I call it a message, is coming from somewhere. We're
Well,
not.
Larry, don't you know that the Harvard and Yale in the 1920s literally taught the class separation, that whites were superior to black. That was part of the curriculum. It was taught. It was understood. I was watching an older movie, I guess it was like in 1936 or something, and it was sort of talking about suffragettes and females, and there was a white female in argument with someone, and she says, "Well, I think that I can go on my way. I'm 21 and I'm white, and therefore I'm free." And it was right there in the script that part of her having the right to be free is she was white. And her argument really was the elevation of women, but my impact on me is like, whoa, so she's arguing she's free because she's 21 and white.
Well, we have Sister Esther Hyatt in the house. We have Sister Shirley in the house. We have Brother Stu in the house, and Brother Leroy is being hit with left, rights, and jabs, uppercuts. I'm looking. It's the information that you're sharing. It gives us an insight into some of the things that are happening in the community that we're not even aware of because we're not in that zone. And it's a huge task if one sees the value of human life in our lives in particular. And the flip side of that is people saying, "Well, you're not gonna be able to buck that trend anyway." However, the information that you're giving allows us to possibly save people in our immediate orbit, young people, whatever. Sister Shirley, you have a question?
Too many, so I'll just resolve on what you were asking and lean on that. Because if
Okay.
I start, I'll be confused.
Okay, Sister Esther, you have a question?
I don't have a question. I've heard Dr. Boles before, and I was just thinking as I came in late, Dr. Boles, but I was thinking that it was suggested about a day ago that some of these things that you're mentioning, like the Risperdal and different kinds of drugs, should be taught to young people who have children. You know, it should be part of a community effort or a small community effort or a large one. But we have to get our young people who are having children to understand what this is all about, you know. Um, so I commend you for putting it all together because I think most people would be able to understand what you're saying, and ask those kind of questions that need to be asked, especially those parents in the school who have children in the schools.
And
So,
this Sister Esther's point brings to mind people, young people or older people smoking contraband, whether it's real marijuana or synthetic marijuana, in the home and their children there.
mhm.
Talk about that kind of scenario or danger.
Well, that is so powerful, and I thank you so much for the comment, my lady at the round table, wisdom table, because we kind of hit on this a couple times, Brother Leroy. If I'm addressing the culture I'm most familiar with, Black America, what is so unfortunate is that too often children don't receive the roots or the wisdom of their people, but they see all of the vices. What do I mean by that? When they're 2 and 3 years old, it used to be, at least I'll just draw from mine, my grandmother would read a Bible verse. We'd have us compete about memorizing the Bible verse, even if it was just Jesus wept. But it gave us time with grandmother, or it gave us time with mother, or it gave us time with my dad, because he was proud when we could quote something and tell him what book. It's not so much that it's the Bible, but that is even the Bible verse. It's the activity of something positive. It's reinforcing and it's family connecting. Today, children are sat down in front of a television set, given a bowl of cereal, and the parent goes home and does something else. On the way, they may come pick up the bowl, and the child is handed a PlayStation. They're playing some kind of gizmo on a computer. They get in a car, they turn on a video. What has happened is the child gets none of the parents. And they can watch Mama smoke a cigarette. They can watch Uncle Billy smoke a joint. They may see somebody snuffing cocaine. But nowhere are they diluting this negative appearance. Nowhere are they giving some wholesome thing. They're allowing the television and YouTube and Facebook to train this child what the world is like. Consequently, in the Black community, we come out with none of the Black aroma. They have nothing to lean back on and say, this is my heritage. This is my strength. This is what I have to be careful of. There are no precautions. We've given no rule book. We've allowed them to absorb whatever they could and go out and fight whatever they can. And consequently, if they've never heard grandmother or daddy or mommy or uncle talk about, here's how you address this issue, or here's what you need to watch out for, they are not adequately armed to go out into this United States of America. Nobody's preparing them.
Yeah.
And then we turn around and say, well, I think they're killing our children, or look at the hatred they're showing. We didn't prepare our children to know how to circumvent that obstacle. They have no armature. They do what may be carnal. That means they may get angry, they may talk too roughly, but they've already been targeted. And we're not doing what we need to do to prepare them. If you know that this animal is after you, you arm yourself, you protect yourself. But we have broken down. We no longer prepare children for the United States pervasive prejudices.
Sister Boles, in an earlier conversation, you mentioned that military, young guys going to be a year in Afghanistan or Iraq or some other place they never heard of, and what kind of drugs are they given? So-called medication.
Oh my goodness. Lexapro is a big one. Lexapro is a big one. Anything that can cause, now we used this term before, it's called amnestic.
Wait a minute. Doc.
It's coming from the word amnesia. Everybody knows what amnesia means.
Okay.
I'm trying to get it where you don't remember details. There talking about children dressed in and coming in, and they've been ordered, you know, he is an enemy and he's got phones on him. So there's some people, particularly young black males, that they got a strong mama figure, or they've been in the Baptist church, or they got a hallelujah community. Thou shalt not kill is a serious thing. And you go through military, you go through boot training, and you look at someone and they've done you no harm, but someone tells you that is the enemy. It's one thing if you're shooting from a mile away and it's your marksmanship. There's something totally different when you look in their face and know that you're about to end their life. And I've worked a lot with post-traumatic stress syndrome, and a lot of these soldiers become homeless. They go to the street because they say, I look at my little boy and see the boy I killed. Or I look at my wife and remember the woman I had to shoot. So these kinds of mental torture is not handled. They come back from the military, get released, and say, go home with your family. What happens if you take with you those ugly memories? So what do? They give them things like Leroy or Lexapro or Ativan. All of these things are intended to shorten memory. So when you start talking about how is post-traumatic stress treated, most of the time it is an anxiolytic or an amnestic that they dope you up on.
Brother Leroy goes out with the Final Call newspaper, and a page that I didn't see in the June 5th issue of the Final Call is on page 17. What do you become when you shoot to kill someone who is unarmed and not an immediate threat to you? And this is on has a military illustration on it, on that page 17 in the June 5th issue of the Final Call. And I didn't even get the question from but the universe had asked that question. So.
Well, I'm telling you, Brother Leroy, every culture that's not white American has asked it. When I was working with the Navajo people in Tuba City, Arizona, as a Navajo Nation, I learned so much, because you may or may not know it's the Navajo language that helped the United States win World War II.
Oh.
They could not break, the Japanese could not break the code because it was written in Navajo, a language that they were totally unfamiliar with. So that was the one code they could send messages that no other party was able to break. So Navajo people don't get that kudos, but they were with their language that helped send messages to Churchill and others. Why am I saying that? Well, the Navajo people have a cleansing ritual. When they have young military coming home, they don't send them back to their family. They go to a shaman, and the shaman does a ceremony in a sweat lodge. They do a ceremony with sand painting, and the whole intent is to what they call excise the dead spirit attached to the soul of the soldier.
Wow.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Wow.
And looking at the title here, what do you become when you shoot to kill someone who is unarmed and not an immediate threat to you? One of my colleagues corrected me, or corrected the title. What have you become when you shoot to kill someone who is unarmed and not an immediate threat to you? Now, we were talking about this question that has been coming up in our little arena. You know, we talk all the time to each other. And as soon as she mentioned something about people killing people, you know, like the police in our communities, they'll kill people and then they'll put something down, like an old gun, and say, well, I was afraid. I was afraid for my life because this young man had a gun, which he may not have had. And, you know, I sometimes wonder, who are these people these policemen, these security people, whomever they are, why, how do they go home at night and sleep when they know
Well,
that?
I can tell you that
Yeah.
they separate, I'm addressing this because I actually have been in white America most of my educational life and certainly my professional life, and I'll give you this example, and I think it answers your question.
Mhm.
There was a female, very wealthy family, and she wanted to be my friend. So she was always developing things we did together, and I benefited, I enjoyed it, and we happened to be together in a very posh hotel. And we had come from the swimming pool, and she had asked me to order room service. And while we were talking and going on, the guy knocked, and when he came in, he was bringing our meal. And he was about our age, a young waiter. Well, my friend stood up while he was in the room, began removing her bikini. And I shouted, what are you doing? And she said, what? I said, there's a man in the room. She looked at me and said, oh, he's just the waiter.
Hmm.
And I placed it in my head. And then, now with time, I understand. When you are accustomed to service or someone serving you, however you want to think about it, you relegate them to something less than you. Now, I'm sure she would not have disrobed in front of her brother or her father or maybe someone that I would be with, but she had no problem revealing her entire nakedness to a foreign man because he was a waiter.
Hmm.
So in her mind, she's conditioned. It's kind of like how people do in front of a dog. Some people will disrobe and not see pleasant the dog there. It's just the dog. Well, that's what I think happens. They compartmentalize your value, that you're not the same as I am, so you looking at my nakedness has no meaning. But that's why I was shocked, and I had to process that. I'm saying that is a young man, he's probably our age, maybe a few years older, but you're just getting naked in front of him. If he touched you, you're going to say, oh, foul, that he had no right to put his hands on me. But I'm sitting there thinking, how can you just start removing your clothes? There's a man in the room, but to her, he wasn't a man. He was just a waiter.
Hmm. Hmm. There's some other
So if
things.
you can compartmentalize like that, I'm sure the mindset is, oh, that's just a black man, or that's just a black woman. That there is that kind of ability to relegate insignificance.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And I witnessed that. It blew me away. I was like, oh, what are you doing? Oh, he's just a waiter. And I'm thinking, oh, so you think you can just completely strip bare, and this viral young man is standing there waiting for his tip. What are you going to do, walk across the room nude and get him some money, put some money in his hand, and he's going to leave and not have seen anything? And if you think about it, that's kind of what slaves were like. You were not supposed to have understood or see or know what was going on in the big house.
Mm-hmm.
The old folks would say she has no shame.
Yes.
She has no shame, and that story is repeated over and over again.
But it also means, Brother Leroy, that the person doing the looking is going to get the punishment, not the one doing the showing. Think of Emmett Till.
And Ginsburg, 100 years of lynching.
Yeah, she can parade naked, but he dare not whistle, dare not touch, dare not anything. He is the one punished, and she's not chastised at all.
What's happening today?
Let me see. Is there anything else, Sister Shirley?
No, sir.
Sister Shirley said if she asks questions, she gonna get confused.
It's overwhelming. It's overwhelming.
In a school situation, what is some advice that you give parents who have young children who could be easily labeled by other people as being hyperactive, etc. What is the advice that you give them?
Okay, the very first, and I give this to all pediatric patient parents that I had. The best thing, young parents, grandmothers, that you can do for a child between the age of 3 and 6, make sure the child knows his or her name. Too many children enter in with nicknames, and they have these long, non-pronounceable names, and if they're going into a system of impatience and intolerance, they get labeled slow. If you ask them what is their name and they can't say it, if you gave them a name they cannot pronounce, it's your responsibility to teach them how to say it. And that's my number one thing. Let a child be able to identify themselves. They're not pee pee poo poo, bee bee baby. That's ridiculous to name a child something they cannot say. I was a young man named Quentin, and he couldn't say Quentin. He couldn't. What is his name? Quentin. He couldn't. And I'm saying, how do you want him to present? When a teacher is going down the row and asking you, please stand up and state your name, and you can't say your name. You have handicapped. You have labeled your child with whatever you did, and it's not on him, but he will wear that label for the rest of his educational career. So number one, teach the child how to say the name. And they need to be able to say their entire name. And they need to keep their fingers out of their mouth while they're saying their name. They need to be able to answer clearly simple questions. How old are you? Where do you live? If you don't wish to have the address, you need to be able to say the city. Where do you live? New York City. Where do you live? I live in Harlem of New York. They need to be able to articulate that because the impression of who they are is made at such a young age. I've had teachers talk about holding a child back in kindergarten. I'm saying, what nonsense is that? Kindergarten wasn't meant to start him off slow. Kindergarten meant to give him a head start, but they said, well, he's not socially mature to move on. Well, how are you socializing him by holding him back? So that's my number one comment. Parents, teach your child how to say their name. Teach them how to answer simple questions. The best thing you can do between the age of 4 and 6 is read to them because reading gives words that are repetitive. When I was young, we learned nursery rhymes. They don't do that anymore. But Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall. Humpty Dumpty had a great fall has a meaning. It teaches a child how to listen. And they listen for the rhyme. And when they learn the cadence or the tempo of language, they speak more clearly. If all they hear is swear words, and some children can burn your ears with what they are able to say, they will be labeled. Teach your child about an inside voice and an outside voice. Children who come into an inside setting screaming and being loud gets labeled. So those are ways you can prepare your child for school that shouldn't take you much effort at all. It's not buying them designer clothes. It's not matching their tennis shoes with their jackets and their book bags looking like a cartoon character. It doesn't cost a single dime to prepare your child to be accepted into a system and not labeled.
What about precautions against falling for putting their children on drugs?
Say that again?
What about advising them to be careful about putting their children on so-called hyperactive?
Well, I'm going to tell you, if a teacher cannot understand, that's why I kept emphasizing, if your child can't pronounce his name, puts their fingers in their mouth, when they're asked to sit down, they stand up, or if they're asked to follow and they get out of line. See, too often, Brother Leroy, what I've observed, in some household, a parent repeats themselves 10 to 15 times before a young black child complies. And I've been at grocery stores where I just want to stop some parents who say, sit down, don't stand in the cart. Sit down, don't stand in the cart. And on number 5, they're still saying, sit down, don't stand in the cart. Why is that problematic? Because that same child, when they go to school, when the teacher say, go over there and sit down, they won't do it the first time. Or the twice before they do it. If that child's used to being told 5 times before they comply, they will label that child hyperactive. They'll say the child doesn't follow directions. But the parent set them up. If the parent asks them to sit down and then physically sat them down, then they are teaching the child that when I ask you to do something, you do it immediately. So in some households, they literally let the child believe they got 5 chances before they have to do what you told them to do. In a school setting, that's written all over it.
Okay. Question before we leave. Sister Esther?
Well, I certainly agree with the last point you were making. I've had experiences wherein I've asked the children or one youngster to go home and find out what city your parent is from. I think I concurred with you earlier when you said they need to be able to identify themselves. They also need to know their address. A child should not leave your classroom or without knowing where he lives, you know. And it should be fun. You could make a game out of it, you know. Where was your mother born? Some children, or where was grandma born, who's in his life every day? And oftentimes they don't know that. So it's so interesting because this is all, before I came here, I was talking to a colleague of mine about most of the points that I've heard when I sat here. What does that mean? Maybe we're getting there. You know, people are really concerned about this, what we're talking about, and maybe we should do something about it. I'm going to share that with others. Some of the points that you made, I'm going to share, and some of the points that were brought up here, some of the questions.
Share with Doctor your discipline.
Okay, I'm a school psychologist, retired. So, you know, some of those points that you were making, those were things that those were points I saw every day. I heard every day, you know. And I think a person like me had to be somewhat courageous in a way. I didn't think it was courage, but I just took those chances because oftentimes parents really don't want to hear anything good. I shouldn't make that a general statement. But, you know, when I've shared with parents that as I had him in my little office, I found him to be witty. He asked very good questions. And all those positives that you really want to see in a youngster. And the parent was unhappy about that.
Explain that. Unhappy about
that. Yeah,
being told positive.
Well, you know, many of our families are disjointed. They're complex. Let's put it this way. This was a situation where this mother, very intelligent, talented woman in many ways, would not let her son, who was 9, see his father. And
the boy looked like the father.
I assume. I didn't know about the father. But she wanted to find something wrong with this child.
Because he acts like his father.
Yeah. Well, maybe he didn't act like his father. I think the mother really wanted to have a relationship with the father. Really. But that was the only way, a foolish way to go about it, by not believing me, who's telling you all these good things. I mean, some parents want to hear the good, you know, all the time, but it wasn't so. That was just one example. And the boy was very, very bright in many ways. All I did was talk to him. And we could talk for maybe an hour. and there was nothing wrong with it, but I think this parent wanted to see something wrong in her job, because she was very annoyed. I don't know, Dr. Boles, have you had that?
Well, I'm listening to you, and the part of me, I have such a pain hearing it, because what you're saying is so true, and I've seen it as a pediatrician, that when a child is not given their history, they don't have an identity. And that's what I was emphasizing. I heard you say that children ought to know where their grandmother's from, and they ought to know what grandmother's name was before she got married, or what was her name.